the day starts. All right. Everyone got it open, ready to go? Sure. It's not very definitive. So simplifying a few radicals, that's kind of where we started with this stuff. Remember that worksheet? How do you simplify the square root of 120? Remember, we want a perfect square and something that's potentially not a perfect square. If that number is a perfect square, like if it was the square root of 144, don't break it down. Like square root of 144 is 12, right? That would just be 12. This is not a perfect square, but what perfect square is 120 divisible by? 30 and 4. Yeah, so 4 is the perfect square. 30 is not, but there is no perfect square that comes out of that. So what is this value? 2 times the square root of 30. Okay. Look at number 2 here. So this, if you want to rewrite it, you can think of it like this, right? Remember, when you have a radical over a fraction, you can say the radical of the numerator divided by the radical of the denominator. How would you rationalize this? Let's see. Who wants it? Chris, what would you do? Rad 3 over rad 3. Right, you're multiplying by 1. We don't want to change the value of it. We just want to change how it looks. So we're going to multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. So rad 2 times rad 3, can you multiply those? Yes, because they're both radicals, right? So that becomes rad 6. What do you get as a denominator? Just 3. Okay, so rad 6 over 3, can you divide those? Why not? One's a radical, one is not. If they're not the same, you cannot divide them. So this is your answer. Okay, number 3. There's an easy way and there's a hard way to do this one. What would you do, John?
Can you make it 4 over 1?
Yeah, so if we divide this, right, 24 divided by 6, because they're both radicals, you're allowed to divide that. 24 divided by 6 is 4. So really, you can ditch the 1 and just call it the square root of 4, which is what? 2. And that's your answer. All right, jump over to number 4. Ash, what would you do first on this one?
Get to rad 9 and rad 2.
Break that 18 down. Okay, so the square root of 9 and the square root of 2. So this would be rewritten 3 plus 3 rad 2, right? This is 3 rad 2 over 6. Grant, can you tell me what you would do next on this?
Can you divide it?
Everything's divisible by what on this one? Not 2, 3, right? Everything here is divisible by 3. So if we reduce everything by dividing by 3, then I'm going to get 1 plus 1 rad 2. Now, technically, you don't need that 1, so you could just say 1 plus rad 2, and that would be fine. Divide 6 by 3, and you get a 2. So this, or I personally like this better, but that's up to you. I'll take either one of those. Can I divide rad 2 by 2? No, one's a radical, one is not. Don't divide if they're not both radicals or both not radicals. Yeah, Jessica.
Where did you get 1? And 1 plus?
This one? So it was 3 over 6, right? And if I reduce that, 3 over 6 becomes 1 over 2, right? So that's a 1. You can, if you like it better, you could put it like this, 3 over 6 plus 3 rad 2 over 6, right? You can separate and make the denominator of 2 separate pieces if that makes more sense to you. And then this you could write as 1/2 plus rad 2 over 2. I'm okay with that. Personally, I like that better, but it's not wrong. Okay. Okay, number 5. Let's see. Lauren, what would you do here? You could break down the 15. What would you break it down to? Okay, so if you broke down the 15, 3 and 5 times rad 5, what is rad 5 times rad 5? 5, okay? So this would be 5 rad 3. That's actually not the way I would do it, but it's not wrong. Anyone see a different way to do it? I would multiply them first. I would go 15 times 5 is 75. And then I would break that into the square root of 25 and the square root of 3, which is 5 rad 3. I don't care which one you do. If this makes more sense to you, go right ahead. In my brain, I would multiply them first. Okay. Okay, number 6. What do you do with that? When you square it, Stephen, what's happening? What do you got to do? Yeah, so what's that going to look like?
2 5.
Oh, you're saying 2 rad 5 times 2 rad 5? Yeah? Totally works. What do you get from that? So what can be multiplied here? 2 times 2 is 4. Rad 5 times rad 5 is the square root of 25, which is 5, right? So 4 times 5, or 20. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Anyone do it a different way? John?
Can we just use the square to get rid of the square root of the radical?
Yeah, so you could square the 2, right, which is 4, and then square the square root of 5, and 5 and the square root of 5, the square root of 5 squared undoes that radical. So then it's just 4 times 5, which is 20. So both of those are great. However you see it is wonderful, and they both work. Questions on that? All right, let's factor. When you solve a quadratic by factoring, what has to happen first? It has to be equal to 0, okay? So if I'm going to make this equal to 0, I'm going to add 24 to both sides. So I get x squared minus 11x plus 24 equals 0. How do we solve by factoring? The star. So we're going to set up star method here. What can you multiply to get 24 that you can add to get negative 11? And remember, if you're multiplying to get a positive, but you're adding to get a negative, do you need positive, positive, negative, negative, or positive, negative for your numbers? Negative, negative. If you're multiplying to get a positive, those both have to be positive or they both have to be negative. But if you're going to add to get a negative, it's got to be the negative. So what two numbers can you multiply to get 24 that you can add to get negative 11? Negative 8, negative 3. Okay, now here's the problem with these. A lot of times people get to this point, x minus 8 and x minus 3, and they call that their answer. But remember, we're solving quadratics now. We want to know what x equals. So if this whole thing equals 0, then what are our x values? 8 and 3. Essentially what you're saying is x minus 8 equals 0, solve that, and x minus 3 equals 0, solve that. So you're just adding 8. So x equals 8, add 3, so x equals 3. So x would equal 8 or 3 for that. If there's no coefficient to the x, it's just the opposite of what you see there, right? Okay, you try this one then. Solve by factoring. Give it a go. Anyone find it yet? All right, let's set this up. What'd you put up top? Negative 56. 2 times a negative 28, so a negative 56. What'd you put on bottom?
1.
a 1, right? This is a 1, the B term. You have a 2 here and a 2 here. I should have said first, if there's a GCF, we always factor it out, right? But there was no GCF. Okay. What can you multiply to get a negative that you can add to get a positive? Is this going to be positive, positive, negative, negative, or positive, negative?
Positive, negative.
Positive, negative. Okay. What did you get?
8, negative 7.
8 and negative 7. And then you just have to make sure on these that you reduce. So 2 over 8 is 1 over 4. So that's going to be x plus 4. And then 2x minus 7 equals 0. What do you do from there? Yeah, set both parts equal to 0 because we need one or the other to equal 0 if the whole thing is going to equal 0, right? So x plus 4 equals 0 and 2x minus 7 equals 0. So take away the 4 and x equals negative 4. Add the 7 and then divide by 2. So x equals, you can either call that 3.5 or you can call it 7 over 2. But those should be your two answers. Okay, I'm going to skip the solve by graphing right now because I don't want to have to jump over to that, but I'll come back to it if we have time. So go to number 11. How do you solve by square root? How is this one different? This is the one that I said was the easiest. I think it's the easiest one. What do you do?
Square root.
Not square root yet. What were you going to say, Sarah?
Don't you have to like bring this 7 to the other side? Oh wait, I'm on the wrong one.
Oh, you're on 13. Yeah. Completing the square, yes, we would move the 7 over. What do you do with the number 11 here? Not GCF. Move the 32. So this one's funky because we're so used to setting it equal to 0, and now we don't want it equal to 0 anymore, okay? We want to get x by itself. So just remember square roots, you should think isolate, okay? Whenever it says solve by square roots, isolate. We want to get the x by itself. So add 32. So 2x squared equals 32. Divide by 2. Here's where it goes awry. What is x?
Positive, negative.
It's plus or minus, yes. Don't forget that, okay? Whenever you square root both sides, then you have to put in that plus or minus. So x is plus or minus 4. Okay. So do number 12. Give that a go. Remember, we want to isolate. What'd you get? Plus or minus 2 rad 5. So divide by 4, and you get x squared equals 20. And then when we square root that, that's where you want to put in the plus or minus right away. But the square root of 20, you can do the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. So that's 2 times the square root of 5. Okay. Okay, 13, completing the square. Sarah, what do you want to do first here?
Do plus 7.
Yes, we want to get that 7 out of there because it's not a perfect square trinomial right now, right? 7 is not a perfect square, so get that 7 out of there. So you get x squared plus 6x plus something equals 7 plus something. How do you find what that something is? This one you have to know for the quiz. I don't put it on there.
Divided by 2 and square it.
B divided by 2 and square it. So 6 over 2 and square it. So this is 9 and 9. Okay. Then we can factor. What does that factor to?
X plus 3.
Square root, and keep the sign. So x plus 3 squared equals 16. And it is oh so lovely when they give you a perfect square over there. What do you do next? square root. So if you square root both sides, what do you have to make sure of? Plus or minus. So x plus 3 equals plus or minus 4. And now here's where sometimes people just stop, but we're not done. We want x equals something. So what do we have to do? Make two equations. You could say x plus 3 equals 4 and x plus 3 equals negative 4. How many of you prefer that to just moving the 3 over and solving them both as one? Are we not sure? Do we not have a lot of opinions on that? So if you do it this way, you would get x equals 1, take away the 3, x equals negative 7. Okay, so those are your answers. The other way you could do it is if I'm subtracting a 3 from both sides, it would be negative 3 plus or minus 4. I still have to simplify that, right? So negative 3 plus 4 is 1, negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7. So you're still going to get to here. It's just a matter of how you want to write it. Do you want to write the two equations? Then do it this way. If you want to just write one equation, just make sure you do both parts of that one equation. Okay. Okay, 14. Now, a little warning for you. This almost looks like a perfect square trinomial, right? Because 4 is a perfect square and x squared is a perfect square. But this is a negative 4, which is not a perfect square, okay? So while it looks like, oh, I could just factor it right now, this can't be a minus in this setup. It doesn't work to factor it. So instead, what we're going to do is we're still going to move that 4 over. So it'll be x squared minus 4x plus something equals 4 plus something. What is going to go in that spot? 4, right? Which feels weird because we just got a 4 out of there, but it was a negative 4. Now it's a positive 4. So 4 divided by 2 squared is 4. Okay, now we can factor that. So what does this factor to? X minus 2 squared equals 8. Okay, and then we can square root both sides. So this is x minus 2 equals, don't forget your plus or minus. What's the square root of 8 in a simplified form? 2 rad 2, right? That would be the square root of 4 times the square root of 2, which is 2 rad 2. Okay, now from here, you're just going to add 2 to both sides. And again, if you would prefer to set this up as two equations, that's fine, but they don't simplify beyond this. So if it were me, I would just write it as 2 plus or minus 2 rad 2, and that's as far as you can go with it. So just leave it like that. If you prefer to say 2 plus 2 rad 2, and then 2 minus 2 rad 2, that's fine too. Okay, quadratic formula. I give you this on the quiz, so you don't need to memorize that. It will be there for you. But please, 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 just remember to put parentheses around that b when it's b squared. That's hugely helpful. That's usually where people make their mistakes. All right, so if we're doing quadratic formula here, this is going to be a negative b is what value? Negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 6 squared, minus 4 times a times c, so 4 times 1 times 9, all over 2 times that a value. Okay, now here's where I said plug this into your calculator, not with the radical. Yeah, Grant.
Just to clarify, we need to memorize the quadratic formula.
No, you don't need to memorize it.
Oh, it's on
Yeah,
the-
this is on the quiz for you.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Is it on the test?
Yes.
You don't have to
Oh,
memorize
okay.
it.
Yeah, you don't need to memorize it at all. What do you get when you plug this into your calculator? 0. What's the square root of 0? 0, right? So this is negative 6 plus or minus 0 divided by 2. Well, negative 6 plus 0 and negative 6 minus 0 is just negative 6. So how many answers are we getting here? Just one, right? Negative 6 plus 0 is a negative 6 divided by 2, which is a negative 3. So that's your only x value on this one. Typically, you'll get 2. The only time you won't is when this equals 0. Okay? Okay, so look at the next one. This one's a lot fancier. Quadratic formula says x equals a negative b, so negative 4, plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times 4 times negative 22 over 2 times 4. There's a whole lot of 4s in there, right? A, B, and C. Okay, so plug this into your calculator. What'd you get?
We got 368.
368. So it's negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 368 over 8. What do you have to do next? Can you find a perfect square that 368 is divisible by? And remember, if you don't know, just make a list. 2 times 2, 3 times 3, 4 times 4, 5 times 5, 6 times 6, right? You can just make a list at the top of the problem and try them all. 368 divided by, I usually start high and work my way low so that I don't find a small one and then have to do extra work. Anyone see it? 16 gets you what?
16.
And 23, yeah. Okay, so this is 4 rad 23 in place of this. So we're going to say negative 4 plus or minus 4 rad 23 over 8. What do you have to do with that? What is everything there divisible by? 4. So if we divide everything by 4, it would be a negative 1 plus or minus rad 23 over 2. And that is as low as you can go. Okay. And I didn't put one on here. I should have. But just be careful right here. If that is a negative number and you're plugging it into your calculator to square it, it should always, always, always become positive, right? Put parentheses around it. It's always positive. Yes.
So, for negative 4 over 8, like in the answer, do we like treat that as a fraction and like reduce, so negative 1 plus?
Negative 1 over 2. Yeah, you can think of it as a fraction. Mm-hmm. Good on that? Okay, let me just real quick talk you through the graphing one. I'll pull it up on my screen. So if you just want to plug them in and check them, go for it. Those are the answers you should get. I'm going to show you up here what it should be. Yes.
On the test, are you going to tell us like round, or do we have to write the whole thing?
I'll tell you, I think I told you where to round. I usually do 2 decimal places on these, sometimes 3. So as long as, yeah, just read what it says. If I don't specify, you can do 2. But I feel like I probably told you where to round on the quiz. I don't remember. Okay. Let's share this for those of you that want to see it. Okay, so solve by graphing. Do you remember what you do first? Y equals, yep. So you need to put your equations in there. Remember, your y2 is always 0, so hopefully that's just stayed there. Make sure you don't have a black box around plot 1. We don't want that. That messes things up. So this is going to be 4x squared plus 3x minus 1. Okay, and then how do you graph this? Zoom 6. Okay, and then once you have your graphs, you do the second trace 5. Enter, 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 right? That'll get you the first one. Then you do it again. Second trace 5, arrow over to the other side, enter, 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 and then you'll get your second answer. Okay? So the homework is just finish the stuff at the bottom. Do it the way I asked, please. Factoring, graphing, quadratic formula, all that.